A sharp voice cut through the quiet hotel lobby. "Sir, you need to leave right now." Every conversation stopped. The piano player froze, guests turned their heads. A tall black man in a neatly pressed dark jacket stood beside the marble reception desk. His silver hair was cut short. His polished black shoes reflected the crystal lights above him. A small travel bag rested at his feet. He did not argue, he simply looked at the hotel manager. "May I ask why?" he said calmly. The manager folded his arms. "This hotel is private. Our guests expect a certain standard." The man's eyes remained steady. "I have a reservation." The manager gave a short laugh. "I highly doubt that." Several people nearby exchanged quiet looks. A young couple whispered to each other. An elderly woman lowered her newspaper. The black man slowly reached into his coat pocket. Before he could remove anything, the manager raised his hand. "No need." He looked toward two security guards. "Escort him outside." The guards hesitated. Neither of them moved. Something about the man's calm face made them pause. The manager noticed. "What are you waiting for?" he snapped. The older guard took one careful step forward. "Sir, if you don't mind." The man nodded gently. "I understand." He picked up his small travel bag without another word. As he reached the revolving door, he stopped for just a second. He looked back at the manager. "I hope," he said quietly, "you never judge someone on the hardest day of their life." Then he walked outside. Nobody understood what he meant. Not yet. 3 days earlier, Marcus Johnson stood in front of a small white house on the edge of Savannah, Georgia. The morning sun warmed the wooden porch where he had spent countless evenings with his late wife, Angela. He held a small watering can. Every rose bush along the walkway had been planted by her hands. Even after 5 years, Marcus watered them every morning. He believed love should continue long after goodbye. A neighbor waved from across the street. "Morning, Marcus." Marcus smiled. "Morning. You still talking to those flowers? They listen better than most people." Both men laughed. Marcus had served 28 years in the United States Army. He had completed missions in countries most people only read about. He had led soldiers through danger. He had carried injured friends to safety. He had received medals he never displayed. When he retired, he packed every award into one old wooden box and placed it in his attic. To Marcus, service was never about medals. It was about people. His life became wonderfully simple. He volunteered twice a week at the local veterans center. He repaired broken wheelchairs. He drove elderly veterans to medical appointments. Sometimes he simply sat beside lonely men who needed someone willing to listen. He never expected anything in return. Everyone in town respected him, but very few knew the full story. One afternoon his phone rang. The screen showed an unfamiliar number. "Mr. Marcus Johnson speaking." "My name is Emily Carter. I'm calling from the Grand Wellington Hotel in New York City." Marcus listened quietly. "We recently discovered a letter addressed to you." "A letter?" "Yes, sir. It has been stored in our private archives for several years." Marcus frowned gently. "There must be some mistake." "I don't believe so. The letter was left with very specific instructions." "What instructions?" Emily paused. "It says the letter must only be handed directly to you." Marcus looked across his garden. The roses moved softly in the breeze. "Who left it?" "I'm sorry. I was told not to discuss that over the phone." She hesitated again. "But whoever left it believed you would eventually come." Marcus thanked her politely. After the call ended, he remained standing in the yard. A letter, waiting for years. Who could have written it? That evening he climbed into the attic. He opened the old wooden box holding his military memories, photographs, unit patches, letters from soldiers, a faded American flag. Near the bottom lay one picture. 5 young soldiers stood together wearing dusty uniforms. Marcus stared at the smiling faces. Only 2 of them were still alive. His hand rested on the photograph. Slowly, very slowly, he smiled. Then his smile faded. A memory had returned. 20 years earlier, a promise had been made, one he had almost forgotten. The next morning Marcus packed one small travel bag, nothing expensive, just 2 shirts, a clean jacket, a pair of polished shoes, his Bible, and the old photograph. Before leaving, he walked through every room of the house. He touched Angela's favorite chair, straightened the family picture on the fireplace, watered the roses one last time. His neighbor watched from the sidewalk. "You taking a trip?" Marcus smiled. "Just for a day or 2. "Business." Marcus looked toward the rising sun. "No, I think." He paused for a moment. "I'm finally keeping an old promise." Several hundred miles away, inside the Grand Wellington Hotel, a general manager named Richard Collins stood in front of a mirror, adjusting his expensive tie. He believed appearances revealed everything about a person. Before the day was over, that belief would cost him more than his job. The train rolled into New York just after sunrise. Marcus Johnson stepped onto the busy platform with his small travel bag in one hand. Around him, people rushed in every direction. Businessmen checked their watches. Tourists pulled heavy suitcases. Taxi drivers shouted for passengers. Marcus simply stood still for a moment. The city had changed. Glass towers reached higher into the sky than he remembered. Streets were louder. Everything moved faster. But he wasn't here for the city. He was here because of a promise. He hailed a taxi. "The Grand Wellington Hotel, please." The driver nodded. "Big place, fancy place." Marcus smiled. "So I've heard." During the ride, Marcus looked out the window. They passed parks, museums, and crowded sidewalks. Every block held another memory of people chasing dreams. 40 minutes later, the taxi stopped in front of the Grand Wellington. The hotel looked more like a palace than a building. Golden flags waved above the entrance. Luxury cars lined the driveway. Doormen in crisp uniforms greeted arriving guests. Marcus paid the driver, picked up his travel bag, and walked toward the entrance. One young doorman immediately opened the large glass door. "Good morning, sir." Marcus smiled warmly. "Thank you." Inside, the lobby sparkled under enormous crystal chandeliers. Fresh white flowers decorated every corner. Soft piano music floated through the air. Marcus quietly admired the beauty before walking to the reception desk. Behind the counter stood General Manager Richard Collins. His expensive suit was perfectly pressed. His smile disappeared the moment he looked at Marcus. Richard's eyes moved from Marcus's old leather travel bag to his simple watch. In less than 3 seconds, he believed he knew everything about the man standing before him. "Can I help you?" Richard asked. "Yes, sir," Marcus replied politely. "My name is Marcus Johnson. I believe someone here is expecting me." Richard typed the name into the computer. Nothing appeared. He frowned. "I don't see a reservation." Marcus remained calm. "A lady named Emily Carter called me." Richard looked annoyed. "Our staff doesn't invite random visitors." "I'm sure there has been a misunderstanding." Marcus reached into his jacket. "I have the address," and Richard raised his hand. "That's enough." Several guests nearby began watching. Richard lowered his voice. "This hotel serves important people." Marcus nodded respectfully. "I understand." I'm here because one of your employees asked me to come. Richard folded his arms. And I'm asking you to leave. The words echoed across the marble floor. A woman checking in looked up. A businessman stopped signing paperwork. The piano music continued, but the lobby suddenly felt much quieter. Marcus took a slow breath. I've traveled a long way. I only need 2 minutes. Richard shook his head. No. You are making our guests uncomfortable. Marcus glanced around. Most people weren't uncomfortable. They were simply watching, curious. I don't wish to cause trouble, Marcus said softly. Then don't. Richard pointed toward the revolving door. Please leave. At that moment, a young receptionist stepped out from a nearby office. Her name tag read Emily Carter. She froze. Her eyes landed on Marcus. Mr. Johnson, Marcus smiled. Miss Carter. Before she could walk over, Richard stepped between them. You know this man? Emily nodded quickly. Yes, sir. I called him. Richard stared at her. You what? The private archive requested that Mr. Johnson come today. Richard's face hardened. You should have informed me. I tried yesterday. You were in meetings all day. Richard didn't even look at her. It doesn't matter. This gentleman has no reservation. Emily hesitated. But the archive file specifically says, I don't care what the file says. His voice became louder. This is my lobby. I decide who stays. Silence spread through the room. Marcus noticed Emily's nervous expression. He gave her a small, reassuring smile. It's all right. She looked guilty. I'm so sorry. Marcus gently shook his head. You've done nothing wrong. Richard turned toward the security desk. James. One of the security guards walked over. He was a middle-aged veteran himself. His eyes immediately noticed Marcus's military posture, the straight shoulders, the calm breathing, the disciplined stance. Something felt familiar. Escort this gentleman outside, Richard ordered. James didn't move. Instead, he quietly asked Marcus, Sir, were you military? Marcus smiled. For a very long time. James stood a little straighter. So was I. Before another word could be spoken, Richard interrupted sharply. I didn't ask for a conversation. I gave you an order. James slowly nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus picked up his travel bag without complaint. As they walked toward the entrance, he stopped beside Emily. Whatever is inside that letter, he said quietly, I believe it has waited long enough. Then he stepped outside with James. Across the street, a long black luxury sedan turned the corner. Neither Marcus nor Richard noticed it. Inside the car sat an elderly man wearing a navy suit with a small American flag pin on his lapel. The moment he looked through the hotel window and saw Marcus being escorted out, his face changed completely. Stop the car. The driver hit the brakes. The old man stared silently at the entrance. Then he whispered, No. They sent him away. The black sedan stopped so suddenly that another car behind it honked. The elderly man inside never looked back. His eyes stayed fixed on Marcus. Open the door, he said quietly. The driver hurried out first. Before he could reach the sidewalk, the elderly man had already stepped onto the street. Despite his age, he walked with surprising speed. James, the security guard, noticed him first. His eyes widened. Mr. Harrison. Richard Collins turned toward the entrance. The color slowly disappeared from his face. William Harrison, founder, owner. The man whose name was written across every grand Wellington hotel in the country. Employees rarely saw him in person. When he did visit, everyone stood a little straighter. Richard quickly forced a smile and hurried forward. Mr. Harrison, we weren't expecting you today. William ignored him completely. He walked past the manager without even making eye contact. His attention stayed on Marcus. Marcus looked surprised. The two men stood only a few feet apart. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Then William's eyes became wet. "It's really you," he whispered. Marcus smiled softly. "It's been a long time." Without another word, William Harrison stood perfectly straight. His right hand rose slowly to his forehead. He gave Marcus a flawless military salute. Every person near the entrance froze, the doorman, the guests, the reception staff, even Richard Collins. Nobody understood what they were seeing. Marcus looked into William's eyes. Then he returned the salute with quiet pride. Only after several silent seconds did both men lower their hands. Richard's mouth was slightly open. "Sir." "What is happening?" William finally turned toward him. His voice remained calm. "You asked this man to leave." Richard swallowed. I believed he was." "You believed." William interrupted him. "You never asked." Silence. The lobby doors remained open. More guests gathered near the entrance. Several people quietly began recording with their phones. William looked back at Marcus. "I owe you an apology." Marcus gently shook his head. "You owe me nothing." "Yes, I do." William took a slow breath. He turned toward everyone watching. 26 years ago," he said, "my son served overseas. He was young, brave, and stubborn." Marcus lowered his eyes. William continued. "One night, my son's convoy was attacked. There was heavy gunfire. Vehicles were burning. Communication was gone," doctors later said. "No one should have survived." The crowd listened without making a sound. William pointed toward Marcus. "This man refused to leave my son behind. Carried him nearly 2 miles through enemy fire. He ignored his own injuries. He saved my son's life." A woman near the entrance covered her mouth. James looked at Marcus with growing respect. William's voice became quieter. "My son lived. He came home. He married. He gave me 2 grandchildren." His eyes filled again. "None of that would exist without Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson." Marcus looked uncomfortable. "You don't have to tell everyone." William smiled. "I think I do." Richard's heartbeat seemed louder than the piano music. He looked from William to Marcus, then back again. Everything he believed about the quiet traveler had collapsed. William reached into his coat pocket. He carefully removed an old, folded envelope. "The letter." Marcus recognized it immediately. "This is why you called me." William nodded. "My son wrote it. He wrote it 6 months before cancer took him." Marcus accepted the envelope with both hands. His fingers trembled slightly. He had faced battlefields without fear, yet this single letter made his hands shake. "You never opened it?" Marcus asked. William shook his head. "It wasn't mine. It belonged to you." Marcus stared at the faded handwriting. His old friend's name rested in the corner of the envelope. Daniel Harrison. A memory rushed back. 2 young soldiers laughing beside a military truck, sharing coffee before sunrise, promising to visit each other's families after the war. Marcus smiled sadly. "I should have come sooner." William placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "No, you came exactly when you were meant to." Behind them, Richard Collins quietly stepped backward. He suddenly understood something terrible. He hadn't embarrassed an ordinary guest. He had publicly humiliated the man who had saved the owner's only son, and every employee, every guest, and dozens of phone cameras had watched it happen. William slowly turned toward Richard. His expression became serious. "Mr. Collins, I believe we need to have a very important conversation." William Harrison looked at Richard Collins without saying a single word. The silence lasted only a few seconds, but to Richard, it felt like forever. Guests stood perfectly still. Employees exchanged nervous glances. Even the piano player had stopped. William finally spoke. "Let's go inside," nobody argued. The hotel owner walked through the front doors beside Marcus. This time, every employee stepped aside. James, the security guard, opened the doors with quiet respect. Emily smiled with relief. Marcus simply nodded to her. "You kept your promise." Emily smiled softly. "I almost didn't get the chance." William heard those words. He looked toward Richard. "What does she mean?" Emily hesitated. Richard quickly interrupted. "It was just a misunderstanding." William raised one hand. "I asked her." The lobby became silent again. Emily took a deep breath. "Sir, I called Mr. Johnson after finding your son's letter in the private archive. I tried to tell Mr. Collins yesterday. He canceled our meeting. This morning I tried again. He told me not to worry about old paperwork." William slowly turned toward Richard. "Is that true?" Richard looked down. "Yes." William didn't raise his voice. That made the moment even heavier. "My son's final letter sat inside this building for nearly 6 years." Richard swallowed hard. "I'm deeply sorry," William answered quietly. "Sorry doesn't return 6 years." Marcus gently placed a hand on William's shoulder. "It's all right. The letter has finally reached me." William smiled sadly. "Only because Emily cared enough to do her job." Emily lowered her eyes. "I was only doing what felt right." William nodded. "And that's exactly why integrity matters." A small group of hotel employees had quietly gathered nearby: housekeepers, bellhops, receptionists, kitchen staff. Many of them looked frightened. William noticed. He faced them. "This is not your failure." He looked directly at Richard. "It belongs to leadership." Richard's face turned pale. He understood what was coming. William invited Marcus into a private meeting room overlooking the city. A warm cup of coffee waited on the table. Marcus carefully unfolded the old envelope. The paper had turned slightly yellow with age. Inside was a handwritten letter. He recognized Daniel's handwriting immediately. His old friend had always written in neat, careful lines. Marcus began reading silently. As his eyes moved across the page, his smile slowly disappeared. Then tears filled his eyes. William quietly looked out the window, giving him privacy. After several minutes, Marcus folded the letter again. "He remembered everything." William nodded. "He talked about you every week." Marcus laughed softly through his tears. "He always exaggerated." "No, he didn't." William opened a small wooden box sitting on the table. Inside rested an old military medal. Its bronze surface showed years of careful polishing. "My son wanted you to have this." Marcus looked surprised. "I can't take his medal." William gently pushed the box toward him. "He insisted. He said, if I ever stop breathing before Marcus does, make sure he knows. He was the greatest brother I ever found." Marcus closed his eyes for a long moment. Nobody spoke. Outside the meeting room, Richard sat alone in his office. His expensive suit suddenly felt heavy. The confidence he had carried for years was gone. Every decision from that morning replayed inside his mind. He remembered judging Marcus's old travel bag, his simple clothes, his quiet voice. He had never asked a single question. He had only made assumptions. A knock came at his office door. "Come in." It was James. "The owner would like to see you." Richard stood slowly. He already knew what awaited him when he entered the conference room. William remained standing beside the window. Several senior executives had joined the meeting through a large video screen. No one smiled. William folded his hands. "Richard Collins, I hired you because you understood luxury. He paused, but somewhere along the way, you forgot something much more valuable. Richard lowered his head. Respect. William nodded. You judged a man's worth before learning his name. You embarrassed a decorated veteran. You ignored your own employee. And worst of all, you forgot what this company was built to represent. Richard quietly replied, I have no excuse. William looked toward the executives. My decision has already been made. The room became completely silent. Richard took one slow breath. He accepted what was coming. Then William spoke the words that changed everything. Effective immediately. You are no longer the general manager of the Grand Wellington Hotel. Richard slowly closed his eyes. He did not argue, he simply whispered, I understand. Outside the conference room, Marcus stood holding Daniel's letter. He hadn't heard the entire conversation, but he knew one thing. Justice had finally arrived, and before the day ended, William Harrison had one final surprise waiting for the man who had once saved his son's life. Marcus stood quietly in the hallway, holding Daniel's letter against his chest. The afternoon sunlight poured through the tall windows, covering the marble floor with warm light. William Harrison stepped out of the conference room. For the first time that day, he looked at peace. It's over, he said softly. Marcus nodded. I never wanted anyone to lose their job. William placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. You didn't. He made that choice himself. A few moments later, Richard Collins walked out carrying a small cardboard box. Inside were family photographs, a framed certificate, and the nameplate that had once sat proudly on his desk. The confident manager from that morning was gone. He stopped in front of Marcus. For several seconds, neither man spoke. Finally, Richard lowered his eyes. Mr. Johnson, I'm truly sorry. I judged you before I knew you. I looked at your clothes instead of your character. Marcus studied his face. The arrogance was gone. Only regret remained. Marcus smiled gently. My father used to tell me something. Richard looked up. He said, the easiest person to judge is the one you've never taken time to know. Richard slowly nodded. I understand that now. Marcus extended his hand. Richard looked surprised. You still want to shake my hand? Marcus smiled. Respect doesn't disappear because someone makes a mistake. It grows when they learn from it. Richard accepted the handshake. His eyes filled with tears. Thank you. As Richard quietly walked away, every employee in the lobby watched him leave. Nobody celebrated, nobody laughed. Some lessons were already painful enough. William turned toward Emily Carter. Emily. She stepped forward nervously. Yes, sir, William smiled. You protected this hotel's values when others forgot them. She looked confused. I only made a phone call. No, William replied. You chose honesty over convenience. You chose courage over silence. He looked toward the senior executives. I'd like everyone to meet the Grand Wellington's new assistant general manager. Emily covered her mouth, her eyes filled with tears. Sir, are you serious? William laughed warmly. I've never been more serious. The lobby erupted into applause. Housekeepers clapped. Bellhops smiled. Even guests joined in. Emily wiped away her tears. I won't let you down. I know, William answered. That's exactly why you deserve it. Then he turned back to Marcus. I have one more thing to show you. They walked through a quiet hallway to a private ballroom. The doors slowly opened. Marcus stopped in surprise. Inside stood more than 200 people, military veterans, hotel employees, local community leaders, families carrying small American flags. Along one wall hung photographs of veterans from different generations. At the center of the room stood a large bronze plaque covered by a blue cloth. William stepped onto the stage. Ladies and gentlemen. Many years ago, one soldier risked everything to save my son's life. He never asked for money. He never asked for recognition. He simply did what honor required. William looked directly at Marcus. Today, we finally have the chance to thank him. The blue cloth was gently pulled away. The plaque underneath read, "The MARCUS Johnson Veterans Hospitality Program. Every military veteran staying at any Grand Wellington Hotel will receive complimentary accommodations for up to 3 nights each year in honor of Sergeant First Class Marcus Johnson, whose courage reminds us that true greatness is measured by service to others." Marcus stood completely still. He never expected this. His eyes became wet. "This is too much," William smiled. "No, it isn't enough." The audience rose to their feet. A long-standing ovation filled the ballroom. Veterans saluted, families applauded, employees smiled proudly. Marcus looked around the room. He wasn't thinking about medals or luxury hotels or the painful mourning. He was thinking about Angela. She would have loved this moment. William stepped beside him one last time. "Would your wife be proud today?" Marcus smiled through his tears. "She wouldn't be proud because people applauded me." Looked at the veterans standing together. "She'd be proud because kindness won." The room fell silent. Those simple words touched every heart. Later that evening, Marcus left the hotel carrying the same small travel bag he had arrived with. Nothing about his appearance had changed. The same jacket, the same shoes, the same quiet smile. But everyone who saw him now understood something they would never forget. A person's value is never measured by the clothes they wear, the car they drive, or the bag they carry. True greatness is revealed by the life they choose to live. And sometimes, the strongest salute is not given to the highest rank. It is given to the kindest heart.